Now, the Foreign Office have urged Britons in Mexico to remain indoors and avoid unnecessary travel amid a surge of violence following the death of a drug dealer.
Well, later this year in June, Mexico is due to host the FIFA World Cup tournament for the third time in conjunction with Canada and the United States. But with violence erupting in Mexico, should they hold the cup?
Well, I guess we've got time, haven't we, to see if it continues. I mean, there's a bit more time. We've got to wait a little bit. Hopefully they can sort this out. But he led the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CJNG, which has quickly sparked waves of violence across the country. And suspected members of the organised crime group set buses on fire. They blocked roads in the area and clashed with authorities.
It's a power struggle, isn't it? It's the government saying, we run Mexico, and the cartel's going, no, you don't. We run Mexico.
Well, let's speak to the head of football governance at Lane Clark and Peacock, Aaryaman Banerji. Have I said it right? I've said it wrong.
Yes, that's absolutely fine. Great to be here.
That's all right. Thank you. Thank you. All right, then, let's talk about this then. The World Cup's a little bit away. There's some time. Do you think that by then the violence will be quelled?
Well, I think that's the big issue, Nana. I think this is a pretty difficult situation for FIFA. As you say, the violence is so extreme that the Foreign Office is giving advice to British citizens, and in the present state, it is difficult to host any sort of major football tournament now. However, we do have just under 4 months until the World Cup begins, and we hope in that time that the violence will be quelled. If it's not, there is some precedent for moving major tournaments at sort of short notice. Most recently, the African Cup of Nations was moved from Guinea to Morocco for infrastructural difficulties.
Every time your phone connects to public Wi-Fi, anyone nearby could snoop on what you're doing. Hackers can steal your information, passwords, photos, and bank details in just seconds. ExpressVPN encrypts your connection, making it virtually impossible for hackers to access your personal information. ExpressVPN is so easy to use. With just one click of a button, you're protected. Streaming, banking, or shopping, you can switch between high-speed servers worldwide in seconds, and your connection never slows down. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code to get up to 75% off, plus 4 extra months free, all backed by a 30-day money-back guarantee. Protect your online life today.
In terms of the World Cup, the 1986 World Cup was moved away from Colombia, ironically, to Mexico because the hosting facilities were inadequate. Now, the difference there is there was a bit of a longer run-up to changing the host. It is an enormous, as you can imagine, logistical challenge. But I think that what this tournament has in its court is that it is, of course, co-hosted with the United States and with Canada. And so that makes it a little bit easier to potentially just transfer those games over to the United States and Canada. Now, that, in my opinion, should be a sort of course of last resort, because the enormous knock-on effects that one would see from the World Cup, one of the hosts being moved, in terms of commercial deals, in terms of sponsorships, in terms of fans who have already bought tickets to particular venues, would be almost unconscionable. So we should try and do everything we can to sort of wait and see until the last possible moment to host this in Mexico. And only at a last resort should we consider moving it away to the United States and Canada exclusively.
Now, I should say on the right-hand side of our screens, we're looking at the podium from where the Mexican president will shortly be speaking, addressing all of the violence and indeed the real concern over this football tournament. I wonder, though, if this is what the cartels are wanting. Frankly, one of the head honchos has been taken out. The cartels now want Mexico to suffer for that. They don't want another one taken out, so they want to make it as painful as possible for the new president, so that they can hit her where it hurts. They can ideally take away the economic activity that FIFA tournament will bring.
Absolutely, and without pretending to be an expert in the intricacies of Mexican cartels, what we have to remember, as you mentioned in your introduction, is that this will be the third time Mexico have hosted the World Cup. It is a source of enormous pride. Hosting the World Cup is always an enormous deal for the host nation, and particularly hosting it with the United States and Canada. Across those three countries, this sort of trans-North American unity that they're almost trying to display there. So for the cartels to have hit them at this particular moment, at this particular stage, so close to the World Cup, it wouldn't surprise me at all should that be some sort of, as you say, a political move to try and really usurp what's promising to be, as always, an excellent World Cup tournament.
Well, they've already, the Mexican Football Association already postponed 4 games on Sunday amid a lot of violence, and that was obviously following the killing of the boss of the drugs cartel. In terms of what's happening there, in terms of football there, I guess lots of other things will be cancelled, and I suspect there'll be lots of retaliation potentially from other gangs as well.
Yeah, well, what we'll see is, as you say, the domestic league season within Mexico being almost curtailed or postponed, and that's going to be very, very challenging. What we might also see is, particularly with some of the infrastructure to be finalised, that the plans for those might be delayed also. So it's an unideal situation for everybody involved, and it's going to take enormous logistical potential from FIFA, from the Mexican government to come together to try and overcome this. And honestly, I hope that they do.
Right.
Well, Aaryaman Banerji, thanks very much indeed for joining us. And of course, we will bring everyone exactly what Claudia Sheinbaum, the Mexican president, has said once she said it, but of course she is speaking in Spanish.
1 o'clock. Now, the government have announced a £4 billion special needs education overhaul to make schools in England more inclusive.
Well, the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, says it's a once-in-a-generation opportunity to reform SEND, that's Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Support.
So Keir Starmer says the current system does not work and insists that he wants the reforms to offer a better education for every child.
Well, let's cross to our political editor, Christopher Hope, who's in Peterborough for us. Chris, you were there at the announcement. There's a lot of speculation around this announcement. The government wants to sell it as if it's offering more support to schools and spending more money. But, of course, the government's been very, very worried about the ballooning SEND budget. I mean, it's absolutely crippling for local councils. Could it be that actually this big fluffy announcement today is to cover up some deeper reforms that are actually about restricting access, not extending it?
Yeah, well, Tom and Nana, I've been in Peterborough here listening to the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson. There is a problem with SEND provision. Those figures ballooning from 240,000 to 640,000 children in our education system, given these very expensive packages, because that's all there is. It's like if you want to buy a car, the only car you can get is a Ferrari rather than a cheaper car. So what the government's trying to do is to bring in new ways to support children in school and not force them to go long ways via taxis paid by us to special schools where, in fact, on average, the basic attainment for GCSE and maths is less than if they're kept within school. So I think this actually, makes sense. The government is trying to reform a system which is a one-size-fits-all but doesn't fit enough people. Basically, any parent now will apply for SEND provision and they get stuck in a queue, wait to be assessed by council. That can take a year or so. In that time, as children grow up so quickly, their problems can worsen. So they brought in these new ways of assessing children's needs. They've got these targeted support for so-called individual support plans, then targeted plus, going all the way up to educational health and care plans, which is all there is at the moment. Those numbers, though, it'll take 10 years to try and get through the system. The numbers on these top-level souped-up plans, these EHCPs, goes up from 5.3% now to nearly 8% by the election. That's about 1 in 12 people in our entire state system, and then falling backwards. But along with that, they'll have these new, lesser targeted individual support plans, which will get as many as 1 in 5 children. The idea being there is that children are not being properly served by SEND provision. But those figures were what was worrying me in the press conference, and that's what I asked Bridget Phillipson about.
Secretary of State, just looking at your forecasts here, the numbers of children with educational health and care plans will be the same this year, same in 2033-34 as now. In addition, 1 in 5 children will have individual support plans. So why is this figure so high? Are the problems getting worse, or are they not being diagnosed?
So what we project is that the numbers of children needing EHCPs will continue to rise. And part of the reason is all of the unmet need that we've seen develop over many, many years. If you're a society that doesn't have support when children are young, and where that support is being pulled away, as we saw in the past, then that does make a big difference to children as they arrive at school. It's part of the reason that so many children arrive not ready to learn. And that's why we're investing so much money and support in early years and working with councils to deliver really high quality provision that will help parents and will meet them where they are.
Now, these plans are out for consultation for the next 12 weeks, and then it'll take a long time before any kind of act or bill comes forward in the House of Commons. We'll see these measures maybe on a statute book by the election, and any real impact on our state system by 2023-2024. But I think this is an attempt, frankly, to deal with a ballooning, out-of-control system to get some children the support they need without going all the way to full SEND provision. And for that reason, I think it will be applauded by lots of parents so worried about their children.
All right, Christopher, thank you very much. He's in Peterborough for us, where Bridget Phillipson was speaking. Well, joining us now, Labour MP for Henburn, Sarah Smith, who joins us now. Sarah, I have a child who is going through the EHCP, and he has a mild cerebral palsy, but he does need extra kind of support. Now, this is going to take a few years for it to go through, as we know, because we've already been waiting 1 year. Part of your programme was that you would then, from 2029, children would then be reassessed again. So having taken years to get through, as soon as he's finished school, he'll have to do it again. And the main part of this takes effect in 2029, when Labour might not even be in power.
Look, I think you and all the parents in my constituency would say they would love to see the change, there to be a magic wand, and that we could just move today to tomorrow to a system that works for all parents and all children. The truth is, we know that that's just not possible, and in order to relay parents' understandable fears, what is being outlined today is a decade-long reform to bring in the change at a rate that is realistic for our teachers and our schools, and recognises and takes parents and children on this journey with us. Today's announcement, as well as the £4 billion of new money, there's £5 billion committed to tackling the SEND deficit in our local authorities, and £3 billion already committed to building the specialist schools and the inclusion hubs to make sure that there is the capital need met for every child, whether that's a regulation space within your local primary school, or whether that is stopping the current wastage of spend, which is currently being spent on private equity firms who run far too many of the specialist schools across this country right now. And, I think this is a really, really positive day for every child up and down this country, whether you have specialist educational needs or not. I've worked with children who are disadvantaged for many, many years before being elected, and the message that kept coming through from the experience of those children and young people was that the education system feels like I'm a round peg and I'm trying to be, a square peg, and you're trying to fit me through a round hole. And what we're trying to start to outline today is how that system changes. So instead, the school and community wrap around the individualised needs of every child at the earliest point possible, so that we prevent the huge wastage that is currently happening.
And we get to the point, Sarah Smith, because there is huge wastage. Anyone with eyes to see can see the explosion in spending that's going on SEND right now. It's crippling councils. Potholes aren't being filled because taxis are being sent to, frankly, in many cases, send posh kids to their schools because their parents won't do it. I mean, ultimately...
Not quite like that.
I mean, it is in some cases.
That's entirely...
In some cases, I said. Now, Sarah, in this extraordinary situation, But has the Labour Party just taken the opposite approach to how it did when it came to disability benefits reform, which failed in Parliament because of a massive Labour rebellion? Are you now taking the softly, gently monkey approach that's going to take decades to actually work because the government is so scared of yet another rebellion?
First of all, let's just take your first point, which is that this government has also invested in Lancashire an extra £57 million to tackle specifically potholes. And it's a very separate budget to the money that is currently being used to transport children to the schools that they are accessing.
On that point, because you raised
reform
that specifically...
Reform lead my county council in Lancashire.
Yes.
There are more potholes opening up across Hyndburn right now than we've had even under the Tories previously.
Oh, I am sure, but Sarah, you do recognise that the pothole budget is not a statutory duty, whereas the SEND budget is a statutory duty. So the greater number of SEND children, the greater proportion of a council budget has to be spent on SEND, to the exclusion of things that aren't a statutory duty, like potholes.
No, so the why this is where tackling the local authority deficit, it was a huge announcement as part of bringing forward these reforms. This is not about going, when you use the term softly, I mean, there is no parent or family that is more deserving of a sympathetic and careful approach than a family with a SEND child. I rarely hold a surgery where I don't have parents breaking down in tears, grown men in tears in front of me because they've been broken by a system that is failing them. We are doing something about it. We are going to stop it being adversarial. We're going to stop that fight for parents. We're going to move at a pace that enables them to trust the system before we bring in the changes around things like EHCPs. Every child is being guaranteed the school they currently access, but quite rightfully, we want to move away from wasting money on taxis and on schools run by private equity firms. We have to believe and imagine now a system where your child's needs are understood really early on, that the teaching that they experience and the schools they access meet their needs, and so parents no longer feel that this fight is the only way they have to meet the needs of their children.
All right, Sarah, listen, we hear you, although I briefly want to say, why didn't you guys do this and do what you're saying before you raised VAT, you put VAT on private schools? Because a lot of the people who are special education needs children were being sent there and paid for by their parents. If you'd set all this in place and then you'd put that would have been far more realistic. Now a lot of these kids are in state schools that can't facilitate or look after them.
What we've seen this month and in recent news is the good news of what's now happening with stabilising and improving the economy, but also that we are bringing down the NHS waiting lists. We have the millions of pounds to spend on potholes, even if that's being poorly managed, and that we made that upfront investment because we took the decisions around
Sarah
where
Smith,
we
Labour MP for Hyndburn. Really appreciate your time. Sorry we have to end it there, but thank you very much for joining.